Take a look at a map of the world. Every red border is a wound. Every tiny flag is a declaration of ownership. And every corner of that map is a scar that hasn't healed. You see countries, borders, fences, checkpoints. You see satellites, radar, ballistic missiles, and millions of soldiers standing guard. All of it to protect something that seems simple, a piece of land. But if you tear that map apart, strip away the names, the lines, the concepts we invented, what remains is just rock, grass, and blood. Because tens of thousands of years ago, before the word homeland even existed, before international law, before the UN Charter, before humans ever sketched borders on paper, there was already a border war, not between nations, but between two human species, Homo sapiens, the wanderers, setting foot in Europe for the first time, Neanderthals, the native people who had lived here for hundreds of thousands of years in ancient caves, frozen forests, and icy valleys. They had no flags, no maps, but they had what every modern nation is built upon, ancestral memory. Every cave was a sacred temple. Every stream was a hunting trail passed down through generations. Every forest, a place where mothers gave birth and fathers died providing. And when outsiders came, when Homo sapiens took over those sacred caves, drove out the animals, disrupted the ancient balance, the Neanderthals did not retreat. They raised their spears. They built stone barricades. They lit fires and marked their homeland with blood. History calls it evolutionary transition. But if you were Neanderthal, it wasn't evolution. It was war. More than 60,000 years ago, Europe was a different world. Only endless snow, forests dense like mazes, and red mud rivers carving through frozen valleys. And within that wild landscape, there were people. Not one species, but two. One was native, born, raised, and buried in this land for hundreds of thousands of years. The Neanderthals. The other was a stranger, crossing from the Middle East, facing the European cold for the first time. Homo sapiens, our own ancestors. At that time, Neanderthals were spread across the continent. From the cliffs of Britain to the Ural Mountains, from the Belgian highlands to the forests of Spain. They hunted, made fire, crafted tools, and perhaps even knew how to say goodbye to the dead. Unlike sapiens, who wandered, Neanderthals stayed rooted. They lived permanently around cliffs and water-rich valleys, where their ancestors had once camped and survived. Each group had only a few dozen individuals, but each was its own world, with borders, with history, and with something no one dared to cross. Archaeological evidence does not lie. At La Pharisee, Goyet, Coombe Greenel, scattered across France, Belgium, and Spain, scientists found something unsettling. No overlapping villages, no shared tools, no mixed settlements, only invisible boundaries, but everyone understood them. And every time those boundaries were crossed, something was left behind. Broken bones, shattered skulls, charred ash. What does that mean? It means Neanderthals didn't just live there, they defended it. And not every intruder was a wild animal. Sometimes it was a creature with the same hands, but from a different place. They lived as if always preparing for a siege. Their caves were high up, wide views, narrow entrances, easy to defend. Traps, water sources, and game trails were nearby, but always far from other groups. That wasn't a coincidence. It was ancient strategic memory, passed not through books, but through blood and instinct. A territorial system, older than maps, older even than language. And perhaps that instinct has never truly vanished. The native peoples of the Amazon still guard their forests with their lives. The Inuit in the Arctic still carve the names of ancestors into ice. The Maasai in Africa still call the grasslands home, even without walls. And across the world, from remote villages to modern nations, people keep repeating one truth. This is my land, not because of its economic value, not because of legal papers, but because somewhere in our genes, an ancient voice may still whisper, if we don't hold the land, we will be erased from history. In modern history, borders are drawn in ink. But in prehistory, they were carved with broken bones and ash. No documents, No maps, only layers of earth that once buried entire lives. And in the end, deaths that no one recorded. Grotte du Rhin, France, one site, two species, and a chilling absence. It was once home to Neanderthals. Then Sapiens arrived. The soil layers tell the story. Neanderthals below, Sapiens above. But most telling is the gap in between. No shared tools, no signs of trade, no trace of peace, only a layer of ash, a massive fire, as if someone tried to erase the past. Bones shattered, tools crushed, and inside one Neanderthal skull, a sharpening stone that did not belong. That was not an accident. That was a weapon from the ones who came after. El Sidron, Spain, where the dead were not even left whole. 12 Neanderthal skeletons, men, women, and children, were found. All dismembered, leg bones smashed for marrow, skulls cracked open for brain matter. No ritual, no burial, only the remnants of a meal. Maybe it was desperation, a hunger beyond control. But maybe something far colder. A group of Homo sapiens arrived, killed, and ate those who had once lived there. Sapiens weren't stronger than Neanderthals, but they had something that made every fortress useless. Distance, throwing spears, long darts, sharpened stones flung from afar. They didn't need to face their enemies. One throw from across a ravine could kill. It was a strategy to kill without confronting. And that strategy rewrote the meaning of territory, from archaeology to conclusion. This was not cultural transition. This was conflict. The pattern repeats, from France to Belgium, Spain to Morocco. Neanderthal habitation, sudden disruption, sapiens occupation. And in between, not cooperation, but ash, broken bones, abandoned tools. No coexistence, no neutral objects, no signs of tolerance. This was not two civilizations meeting. This was two armies fighting for the same space. And the most terrifying part, that story didn't end there. In the Andes, ancient Incan settlements vanished in silence, not by natural disaster, but Spanish fire. In the Gangetic Plains, prehistoric civilizations left behind thousands of corpses, bound, executed. Across Africa, ancient stone walls, from Great Zimbabwe to the Sahel, still whisper secrets. No one knows if they were built to protect or to imprison. From ancient ruins to modern times, one truth remains. Borders are never abstract. They are drawn with cuts, burns, and blood. They mark the line between us and those who don't belong. And that division began with the Neanderthals. If you ask an archaeologist, did Neanderthals have nations? They'll shake their head. But if you ask, did they have territory? The answer is yes, because nations are a modern idea drawn by laws and politics. But territory is ancient instinct. It existed long before humans could write, back when we learned to set traps and defend our kill. Modern borders didn't begin with maps. They began with memory. Ask someone in a rural village, why is this place your home? They won't mention boundary lines or GPS coordinates. They'll tell you about the mango tree they climbed as a child, the hill where their parents were buried, or the wall still marked with their child's first measured height. Now, imagine someone arrives and says, "This is no longer yours." How would you react? Neanderthals faced that exact moment. When Homo sapiens crossed the Middle East into Europe, they didn't find empty land. They found another human species, one that had lived there for hundreds of thousands of years. From the cliffside where their ancestors once hung fire pits, to the forest trails they knew by heart, to the stone ground where loved ones were buried. Every inch carried memory. Sapiens didn't just enter a new land. They stepped onto the living history of another people. And Neanderthals did not step aside. And today, we repeat that same act, just with more advanced tools. Border walls, surveillance drones, orbiting satellites. But the motive is the same. This is my home. You may not enter. People cross the deserts between Mexico and the United States, not just because they're poor, but because on the other side, there is water, food, a chance to live. Just like the sapiens who once crossed the Caucasus. Through Turkey into Europe, for one simple reason. There's better land ahead. But when they arrived, they met Neanderthals, a people who would not give way, and they were forced to choose: coexist or remove the ones already there. Identity doesn't live in our blood. It lives in a land. There is no language older than place. A child knows this is home long before they can speak. And when that home is taken, we fight back, not because of law, but because of a deeper fear of losing our roots. Neanderthals knew that feeling. They had no flags, no constitution, no armies, but they had memory passed around the fire, etched in glances, buried in the caves that once echoed with a baby's first cry. And when those memories were threatened, they raised their spears. Neanderthals didn't die because they were weak. They died because they stayed. They had stronger bodies, larger brains. They adapted to the cold, but they didn't move. They didn't change. They stayed, clinging to what they believed was theirs. Meanwhile, sapiens were willing to leave, to invade, to embrace chaos, and if needed, to remove anyone who stood in the way. Neanderthals weren't driven to extinction by nature. They were erased from the map because they refused to abandon what they called home. Neanderthals are gone. They didn't lose a battle. They didn't vanish in a single night. They were pushed back, step by step, valley by valley, from every place they once called home, driven from their hunting grounds, erased from the burial sites of their kin, and in the end, erased from human history itself. No one carved their names into stone. No one recorded their final day in a book. Only layers of cold earth remain, filled with broken bones, burnt embers, and silence. But Neanderthals never fully disappeared. A part of them still lives inside us, in our genes, in our blood, in our immune systems. A faint trace, but enough to remind us we're not the only kind of human that ever lived, and we are not the first to die over land. Territory is not a line on a map. You can print passports, build walls, raise flags, sign treaties, but underneath it all, the same ancient instinct remains. What drives us into war is not GDP, not policy, but memory, identity, and the need to belong. Neanderthals raised spears not for power. They didn't build empires. They didn't expand borders. They simply wanted to keep what was already theirs. And today, we do the same. From the Himalayas to Gaza, from the Arctic ice to the contested islands of the South China Sea, from desert borders to rainforests split by wire. Wherever a map is redrawn, there will be new blood. Wherever someone says, "This is my land," someone else will be forced to leave. But there's one question few dare to ask. We fight for homeland, but how often do we ask, was this land once someone else's homeland? The ground we now protect, was it once the birthplace of another species? Neanderthals stood in that place, and they were erased, not by storms, not by disease, but by a species with a face just like ours. So what stops us from becoming them? Not technology, not morality, not history books, only the awareness that borders are temporary, and that humanity, if it cannot learn to see itself as one, will repeat an ancient tragedy with modern weapons. We've already spilled too much blood just to learn one simple truth. No border is worth the extinction of an entire species. The Neanderthals already paid that price. Do we have to pay it again? If you believe borders are more than just lines on a map, leave a comment. When do you think the first border war in history happened? And if you believe, somewhere out there, another kind of human might still be holding on to their last piece of land, deep in the forest or beneath the ice, then hit subscribe, because the next story will chill you to the bone.